I'm inviting you to turn to Matthew chapter 25. We want to spend our time together in this session and maybe the next two sessions after this. We want to spend our time in Matthew chapter 25. It's a powerful chapter, and the reason we're going here is because, well, we've already mentioned in a previous class about Matthew chapter 25 and the parables and the confusion that is here in these parables concerning the idea of doing and being. There's a strong emphasis in the being concept in Matthew chapter 25. However, as you just on a surface glance, begin to look at Matthew chapter 25, you can easily get confused and think that really what he's talking about is some kind of doing situation. In other words, judgment is based upon doing. Or is it based upon being? And as you get into this, into the depth of these three parables, you begin to understand the clarity of what Jesus is really trying to communicate to us. So we want to spend our time looking at Matthew chapter 25. Now let's just kind of get an overall view of the chapter as we move into it, so you'll remember what is going on in this chapter. The chapter is all spoken by the person of Jesus Christ. If you had the red letter edition, you'll notice that every single word is in red letters, because Christ is giving three parables. Now these are the last parables of his ministry. In other words, this is the final chapter. This is the final explanation. He's not going to say anything about this from this point on. He's going to move into his death, into his resurrection, the crucifixion, resurrection, and then the ascension, and the outpouring of the Spirit. But in these three parables, he's giving his final statement about the judgment of God. There are also parables, of course, in chapter 24. And then it leads into these three climactic final parables. These are the parables of the judgment. Now, where do these come from? Well, if you go back to chapter 24, you'll notice, actually chapter 23, you will notice that Jesus is preaching his final proclamation. His final public preached message is being given in chapter 23. Now, in chapter 23, he's addressing not the leadership of Israel, although he gives the 7 woes to the Pharisees, but he's really addressing the disciples and also the multitudes. And he's warning them about the Pharisees and the leadership of Israel. And he's literally saying, don't be like them, guys. Don't be like them. Oh, come on. You got to see through this thing. And it's all about what? Well, they're stuck on themselves. They're all wrapped up in their own doing. Hey, their whole lives revolve around their own performance. This is really important. For instance, if you look at chapter 23, you'll notice that it says in verse 2, the scribes and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. See, that's an activity. They're all wrapped up in where they sit. For instance, look down at verse 5. But all their works they do to be seen by men. See, they're really into performance. How well did I do? Did I look okay? Was it acceptable? Was it acceptable? Hey, how did it play out? Hey, was it okay? Did I get brownie points for that one? See, they're all wrapped up in the doing concept. They're really wrapped up in, look at verse 6, they love the best places at the feast, the best seats in the synagogue. The whole chapter is full of that. It's a message saying, guys, don't be like that. Don't be focused on the doing. Hey, don't go into the performance level stuff. Hey, this is not about that. That's not what I'm about. Now, when he finishes this message, it's, by the way, is finished with a broken heart. In verse 37, 38, and 39, he's weeping. Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the one who kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to her. How often I wanted to gather you. So he's weeping. This comes from a broken heart. He's not mad. He's broken about this. And he's calling out to them. Oh, come on, guys. Don't be wrapped up in the doing. Hey, don't be focused on the doing. Hey, you're at a crossroads. You go down down one direction of this road. You're going in, what should I do? I want you to go in the other direction of the road, which is, what should I be? That's what I want for you. Now, when he gets done with that, he's going to leave Jerusalem. He's taking off with his disciples. So he grabs a hold of them and says, hey, I'm worn out. This has been a long day. It's been filled with all kinds of trick questions. Then I've given this message. Hey, let's get out of here. So his disciples agree with him, and on their way out, they do an interesting thing. They begin to act like a chamber of commerce, like a tour guide. They begin to point out the various buildings, impressive as they are, buildings of Jerusalem. For instance, verse 1 of chapter 24. Then Jesus went out and departed from the temple, and his disciples came up to show him the buildings of the temple. Look over there, Jesus. Oh, don't look at that roof. Oh, it's gold-plated, man. Oh, the sun is shining on it. It'll blind you. Hey, it's the temple. Oh, hey, did you see that building over there? Hey, Solomon's porch. Whoa, did you know that building over there? We've been working on that thing for 40 solid years. It's going to be something when they get done. And they're really impressed with these building things. Now Jesus looks at him, and in verse 2 says, "Do you not see all these things?" Now, wait a minute. That's just what the disciples said to him. Yeah. See, the disciples came to him and said, "Look at all these buildings. Do you see all these buildings? Aren't they fantastic?" Jesus turns to them and says, "Do you see all these buildings, all these things? Do you really see it? Do you really perceive it? Do you really grasp it? Have you really got a grip on it, man? Hey, what's going on? You want me to see them. I'm asking you if you see them." And then he says this, "Assuredly I say to you, not one stone shall be left here upon another that shall not be thrown down." Hey, all that you see here is going flat, man. I'm talking absolutely flat. I'm talking not one stone left on top of another. I mean, it's out of here. The buildings that you're so impressed with, why are you impressed with them after all? Oh, because it's something you do. See, it's in these buildings. See, your whole deal is about these buildings and what you do in these buildings. Oh, yeah, you come down to the temple and you offer the sacrifice. Oh, I feel so good. Why? Because I did the right thing. See, you're just like the Pharisees and the leadership of Israel. You're really into the doing. You're impressed with the buildings and what you do in the buildings. But hey, what are you going to do when these buildings are flat and you can't do your thing in these buildings? What are you going to do then? What are you going to do when you get old and you can't do? Well, what's going to happen to your faith then? What's going to take place when you break both your legs and your arms and you can't wave your hands in preaching anymore? What are you going to do then, man? What are you going to do? You can't stand on your own 2 feet. What are you going to do then? Where's your spiritual assurance going to come when you can't do these things? Hey, when you don't have these buildings, what are you going to do then? Well, they went out of there and Jesus said, "Let's go." And so off they went to the Mount of Olivet. The Mount of Olives, verse 3. "Now as he sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately." Now this is really interesting. They got to thinking about this. Hey, the irritating thing about Jesus is, he's always right. Everything he said always comes to pass. Oh, brother. So he said, the buildings are going flat. The temple's coming down. Ooh, you don't suppose that's really true, do you? Well, everything else he's ever said has been true, so why wouldn't this be true? Oh, brother, when's it going to happen? We better find out. So they come to Jesus and say, "Jesus, tell us." Verse 3, "Tell us," chapter 24, verse 3, "tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?" Fill us in. So Jesus starts in. Now, he gives a discourse from verse 4 all the way down into, I think it's verse 31. Gives this discourse. It's theology, actually. And as he begins to work through this discourse, he looks at them and says, "You're not getting this, are you? I'm trying to explain this whole thing to you, and you're just not cluing in. Okay, here's what I'm going to do." And he starts in with verse 32 of chapter 24 and says, "Now learn this parable from the fig tree." So he starts in with parables. Now this begins the parables of the judgment. And it's going to continue all the way through chapter 24 and on into chapter 25, which is what we're really interested in. So here's these parables explaining the theology that's answering the question that the disciples ask. The question is, oh yes, it spills out of these buildings are going flat, remember. The question is, tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age? Fill us in, Jesus. Give us the details. So all of this is on the subject of the final wrap-up, the judgment of God. That's what he's talking about. Parables. Now, as he gives these parables, he walks through the parables of chapter 24, but chapter 23, or chapter 25, is the final 3 parables of the judgment. Now, it's really significant that you understand this. I've studied these parables myself in a variety of times, preached on them at a variety of times, looked at them at a variety of times, but hey, when it came right down to it, I really didn't see them as they were. The reason I didn't see them as they were is because I divided them up. I didn't take them as a whole. I didn't look at them as one big deal. In other words, I would take the parable, for instance, the first parable, which is chapter 25, verse 1 through 13, which is the parable of the 5 wise virgins and the 5 foolish virgins. I looked at that parable and studied it all by itself, as if it was isolated, spoken in a sermon all by itself over in another place. Then I would come and I would get a hold of the second parable, which is the parable of the talents, which is verse 14 through 30, and I looked at it as if it was spoken in another place at another time. I didn't see them together. Now, what you've got to do is to remember that all 3 of these parables are spoken at the same time by the same person in answer to the same question in the same place. Now, it's really significant. In other words, these 3 parables are all saying the same thing. They're connected. And you can't divide them up. You've got to see them as one whole. They're all spoken in the same sermon that has the same theme, that's answering the same question, that's trying to say the same thing. Now, that's really significant. Now, I want you to be sure and have the details of the parables. Look at chapter 25. The first parable is the parable of the wise and foolish virgins. Oh, you know it, but let's just whip through it. Look at verse 1. The kingdom of heaven shall be likened to 10 virgins. So you got these 10 young ladies. They took their lamps and they went out to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were wise, 5 were foolish. So we've divided them up. 5 wise, 5 foolish. Now the wise took oil in their vessels, in their lamps. Verse 5. Or verse 3, the foolish took their lamps and took no oil with them. In other words, there was no extra supply. But the 5 wise, they took not only the oil in their lamps, but an extra supply. That's the emphasis. Okay, verse 5. While the bridegroom was delayed, they all slumbered and slept. And at midnight the cry went out and was heard, behold, the bridegroom is coming, go out to meet him. Then the virgins arose in verse 7, trimmed their lamps, and oh my, look what's happening in verse 8. The foolish said to the wise, give us some of your oil, for our lamps have gone out. But the wise answered, saying, no, we can't do that, lest we should not have enough for us and you. So go rather to those who sell and buy for yourselves. Verse 10. So while the foolish went to buy this oil, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready went in with him to the wedding, and the door was shut. Now look at verse 11. Afterwards the other virgins came also, these are the foolish, and said, Lord, Lord, open to us. But he answered, assuredly I say to you, I do not know you. End of parable. Now look at verse 14. Chapter 25, verse 14. It's the parables of the talents. As you get into it, there's a man, he says in verse 14, traveling to a far country, who called his own servants and delivered his goods to them. Now, note the details, verse 15. To one he gave 5 talents, to another he gave 2 talents, to another he gave 1 talent, to each according to his own ability, and immediately went on his journey. Now, then he who had received the 5 talents, verse 16, went and traded with them and made another 5 talents. By the way, talents was money. And in verse 17, likewise, he who had received 2 gained 2 more. So the one who had 5 invested and gained 5 more. The one who had 2 invested and gained 2 more. That's 4. But look at what happened in verse 18. But he who had received 1 went and dug in the ground and hid his Lord's money. Now, verse 19, after a long time, the master comes back. The Lord of those servants came and settled accounts with them. He called them all in, said, let's settle up. Oh, the guy who had 5 said, oh, I got 5 more. And you gave me 5, I got 5 more. In verse 21, the Lord said, well done, good and faithful servant. You were faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of your Lord. So he was rewarded. Now, the guy who had 2 talents, verse 22, he said, Lord, you gave me 2, I got 2 more. So that's 4. Well, good for you. You doubled. The guy that had 5 doubled. Good for you. And isn't it interesting, in verse 23, the same identical reward was given to him. Because it wasn't about how much. It wasn't 10 versus 4. It was about, hey, you were faithful. Verse 23, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a few things. I will make you rule over many things. Enter into the joy of your Lord. Now, verse 24, the one who received 1 talent said, Lord, I knew you were a hard man, reaping where you've not sown, gathering where you've not scattered seed. And I was afraid. I went and hid the talent in the ground. Look, here's what you gave me. Here's what you get back. Verse 26. But his Lord answered and said to him, you wicked and lazy servant, you knew that I reap where I have not sown, and gathered where I have not gathered scattered seed. So you ought to have deposited my money with the bankers, and at my coming I would have received back my own with interest. Therefore he took the talent from him, gave it to the one who had 10 talents. For everyone who has, more will be given. He will have abundance, but from him who does not have, even what he has will be taken away from him. And cast the unprofitable servant into the outer darkness. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. End of parable. Now, last parable. Oh, you know this one well. Verse 31, when the Son of Man comes in his glory, all the holy angels with him, then he will sit on the throne of his glory. All the nations will be gathered before him. He will separate them one from another. This is a big deal. All the nations, not just the Christians, not just those who believe in Jesus, not just Christian nations. I'm talking all the nations, everybody. Jesus is supreme. Hey, he's Lord. He's the Lord of the Son of Man who comes in his glory. And what's he going to do? Well, verse 33, he will set the sheep on the right hand and the goats on the left. Then this king will say to those on his right hand, come, I was, and you did. I was, you did. I was, you did. Oh, you can read it in verse 35, 36. And then the righteous will answer, Lord, when did we? When did we? When did we? And his answer was, oh, look at verse 40. And the king will answer to them, assuredly I say to you, inasmuch as you did it to one of the least of these my brethren, you did it to me. Turn to those who were the goats and said, verse 41, depart from me, you cursed, into everlasting fire, prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was, you did not. I was, you did not. You can read it in verse 42, 43. Then they answered, well, when were you ever like that? And we did not. Verse 45, then he will answer, saying, assuredly I say to you, inasmuch as you did not do it to one of the least of these, you did not do it to me. 3 parables. Now the crisis of the parables is, that as you read them, just on a surface glance, you get the idea that this is all about doing. That the final wrap-up and the issue of judgment of whether you're going to get in or whether you're not going to get in is, how did you perform? That it's all about measuring your performance. Hey, you didn't do the oil thing right. And if you'd have done the oil and had excess oil and been prepared, if you'd have been a good Boy Scout, hey, you would have been in. But you did not do that thing. You did not prepare right. Oh, if you'd have done the right thing with your talent, you buried it. You should have invested it. And hey, if you'd have produced, if you'd have doubled, you'd have been in. But you didn't do that. So hey, you're out. Oh, if you would have just done compassionate ministry, if you would have just done to the least of these, the feeding, the visiting, the taking them in, the housing, if you'd have just done ministry to the poor, you would have been in. But you didn't. You're out of here. So as you look at these parables, the crisis, the issue of the parable seems to be about doing and being. Now, If the surface glance seems to be about doing, performance, if that seems to be the basic issue of judgment, then we know we got a problem. Because from the Scriptures, we know that we're not saved by what we do. We're saved by grace. This is not about performance. Hey, we dare not go down the direction of the road which leads us to, what should I do? Hey, this is about, what should I be? So, therefore, obviously, if we come to the conclusion from these parables that this is all about, what should I do? We have the wrong interpretation. So we've got to go deeper. Let's go deeper. Now it's interesting, as you stand back, oh, this is awesome. As you stand back and look at these parables, you begin to discover some principles. Now if you look at one of them, you might miss it. Even if you look at two of them, you might not see it. But if you look at all three of them together, now remember, they're all spoken by the same person, in the same setting, answering the same question, at the close of the ministry of Jesus. So these parables are all linked together, so you dare not divide them up. So if you look at these parables in relationship to their overall view and how they are intimately linked together and what they have in common and what they're trying to say, you find some phenomenal principles. I want to talk about those principles, which really give you the key to interpreting the parables. Now, one principle that we want to talk about in this particular class session is the principle of the hidden Lord. Oh, the hidden Lord. This is fundamental. Oh, you got to get this. If you don't get this, you'll miss the interpretation of the parables and you will slip into the doing thing. Doing will seem quite natural and normal and an obligation for you. But if you get this principle, you'll realize the deep truth of what he's trying to say in these parables. These are the parables of the final judgment. I mean, we're down to it, and he's bringing us to the final issue. The principle of the hidden Lord. Now, here's the principle. The principle of the hidden Lord in these parables says that there is an apparent absence of the main character of the parables. And he's apparently absent during the time span that apparently applies to our lives in which we are living right now. Oh, that was probably too wordy. Let me give it to you again. That there is an apparent absence of the main character of the parables in the part of the parable corresponding to our lives right now. In other words, the period of time in which we are right now, in which we're living this very moment, it's during that time in the parable, the part of the parable that relates to that, in that part of the parable, that there is an apparent absence of the main character. I'm going to give it to you one more time, because this is really important. The principle of the hidden Lord in the parables is there is an apparent absence in the parable of the main character during the part of the story in which we are living that corresponds to what where we are living right now, right here, this moment. The hidden Lord. Who's the main character? Well, that's easy. The main character, for instance, in the parable of the wise and the foolish virgins, is not the virgins. The main character is the bridegroom. Come on. He's the bridegroom, man. He's coming. Wow. Everybody's waiting. Everybody's anxious. Everybody's anticipating. Everybody's longing. Everybody's on the edge of their seat. Oh, everybody's getting ready for the bridegroom is coming. The bridegroom is coming. He's the main character, obviously, of the story. Everything in the story revolves around him. Hey, the events of the story are ordered by his appearance and disappearance. It's all about him. He is the main character, and he's apparently absent. He's apparently absent during the time that corresponds to where we are living right now. Hey, it's the apparent absence of the main character. The main character is the bridegroom. Now, the period of time in which he is absent it's in verse 6, or in verse 5, and while the bridegroom was delayed, were all slumbered and slept. Now, that's the period of time in which we live right now. Hey, obviously the bridegroom has been delayed. Oh no, he had a flat tire on the highway, on the freeway. Oh mercy! Hey, got a motel? Wow, he's not gonna. Oh, whoa, that's awful. He's gonna be late to his own wedding. Now you realize that this is a joke. It's the oldest joke that's ever been. Have you ever heard anybody turn to someone and say, "Oh, you're going to be late to your own wedding"? Well, here it is. So Jesus is telling a joke. Hey, the bridegroom is late. He's the main character, and he's late to his own wedding. And it's during that lateness that we are living right now. He's been detained. He's apparently absent. Okay, let's go to the next parable of the talents. Hey, well, the master brings him in. He's the owner of everything. Oh, he's the main character, obviously. He owns everything. Everything is his. Even the servants are his own servants. So, hey, everything is under his control. I mean, he's the master. Come on. He's the one that's got it all together. So it's the master. He's the main character. Now, this main character brings everybody in, 5, 2, 1 to 3 servants. And then he apparently goes away. He's gone. He's apparently absent. Well, he's not here. Well, what are we going to do? Well, he's given me 5. Oh, he gave you 2. Oh, he gave you 1. Well, what are we going to do? Hey, I'm going to invest mine in Walmart, man. Hey, I'm going down to Walmart and get involved in it. And he took his 5 and he made 10. And the other guy, well, I'm going to McDonald's. He invested his in McDonald's and got 2 more. But the other guy buried his. During the time that there is an apparent absence of this main character. He's not here. Now, he's going to come back, but he's not here now. He's apparently not here now. Now, the next parable, the last parable. Son of Man comes in all of his glory. Oh, well, if the Son of Man, he's the main character. Well, yeah, he's the one that's dividing the sheep from the goats. Come on. He's the one that's deciding who will go where. He's the chief. He's the head of this whole thing. He's the one that's in charge, obviously. He's the one that's the king, so he's the main character. Now, obviously, he's been apparently absent. Well, how do you know that? Well, when the Son of Man comes in his glory. So obviously, since he's coming, he hasn't been here. He's been apparently absent, and now he's coming. In fact, all of this action was going on about, hey, you did not, and you did. Yeah, I was naked, you fed me. I was hungry, you fed me. I was naked, you clothed me. Hey, all of that was going on. And when was it going on? It was going on during the time when he was apparently absent. So there's that time. That's the time we're living in right now. Now, the main character then is Jesus himself. He's the main character of the bridegroom in the first parable. He's the master who owns everything in the second parable. And of course, he's actually named in the third parable, the Son of Man, when he comes. Now, as you get into the parable, you realize that we have said over and over again, apparently absent, because that's the key to the parable. See, he's not really absent. Well, he's not there. Well, yes, he is there. Well, no, he's not there. Well, we didn't see him. That's true. He's apparently absent. But the truth of it is, oh my, he's been there all the time. He's not been absent at all. Can you believe that? He's been here all the time. Now you see this most forcibly in the last parable. In the last parable, when the Son of Man comes in all of his glory. Coming. Well, he's come, so he hasn't been here. He's apparently been absent. I know. But when you get down to the separation, remember what he said. Verse 40 again. The king will answer and say to them, assuredly I say to you, inasmuch as you did it to one of the least of these, my brethren, you did it to me. Well, wait a minute. What he's saying is that, hey guys, I have been here all the time in the least of these. In other words, there's a fundamental biblical principle that somehow, some way, God has attached himself to my fellow man. And what I do to my fellow man, I do to Jesus. Why? Because Jesus has attached himself to him. And Jesus has hidden himself in the least of these. So the one who has apparently been absent has really been here all the time, and we didn't even know it. Can you believe that? He's been apparently absent only. for he's been here all the time, hidden in the least of these. Now, take that idea and play it back into the other two parables. For instance, the parable of the talents. Hey, the master comes, he owns everything, he's the main character. He divvies out 5 to 1 to 3 servants. Then he gets in his Cadillac, he pulls down the lane, and we watched him. We waved goodbye to him. Hey, goodbye. Hey, there he goes. He's up over the little hill, and he goes down to the end of the lane, makes a left turn, and disappears around the bend. But wait a minute. What if he stopped? What if he pulled into the field? What if he got out and he snuck back here? And what if he's been here all the time watching us? What if he's not been gone at all? Play it back into the first parable. Parable of the 5 wise, 5 foolish virgins. Hey, well, the bridegroom just didn't show up. We got all ready. We came down here. We got oil in our lamps. We're ready for him, and he didn't show up. They said flat tire on the interstate. Went to a motel for the night, forevermore. So we're sleeping and slumbering. But wait a minute. What if? What if he's been here all the time? What if he didn't have a flat tire? What if this apparently absent bridegroom has been here watching? What if this has been some kind of test all the time? The hidden Lord. Now, this is not as far-fetched as you might think. Martin Luther, in his theology, one of the great points of his theology was that God has revealed himself by concealing himself. Now, when I read that, I thought, well, that's the stupidest thing I ever heard of. You know, God has revealed himself by concealing himself. I mean, if God wants to reveal himself, why doesn't he just reveal himself? No, God has revealed himself, and the technique, the methodology by which he reveals himself is he conceals himself. Isn't that an interesting concept? It's the concept of the hidden Lord. The principle of the hidden Lord. God has revealed himself by concealing himself. Let me give you an example. For instance, you come to me and say, I want to see God. I say, that's no problem. No, I want to see God. Hey, I can show you God. Well, I want to see God. That's fine. Come with me. So I take you out to a cross, a hill called Golgotha, and I point up to that middle cross. See the guy on the middle cross? Yeah. You see the guy on the right, no, on the left, yeah. Well, this guy on the right, on the middle cross, hey, he looks just like that. No, look at the guy on the middle cross. Do you see him? Yeah, that's God. And you look at me and say, what are you talking about? That's God? The all-powerful, omnipotent, almighty, all-knowing God? That's God? I mean, broken, mutilated, trapped, beaten, bleeding, beard yanked out by its roots, hardly recognizable? That's God? Yes, that's God. Well, that can't be God. Yes, that's God. Because you see, God has hidden himself in the hideousness, in the brokenness, in the suffering, in the pain and the agony of a rugged cross. God has hidden himself there. And when by faith you embrace him, when by faith you march into that cross and you embrace him, he will reveal himself to you, and you will come out knowing him like you've never known him before. The hidden Lord. Let me give you another example. Which one of us got up this morning and said, oh, I hope I have dark moments today. I hope suffering comes to me. I hope the sun doesn't shine. I hope all four flat tires. All tires are flat. Oh, I hope everything goes wrong in my life. I hope I mash both my thumbs at the same time. I hope nobody in their right. I hope my body is racked with pain. Nobody in their right mind gets up in the morning and says that. Unless you understand that God has hidden himself in the dark moments of my life, and in the pain and in the agony and in the suffering and in the hard times When I, by faith, march into those hard times, and I literally begin to look for Him, and I trust Him, and I lean on Him, and I let Him flow in my life, that somehow He brings a revelation of Himself in those moments that absolutely, whoa, I see Him like I never could any other way. He reveals Himself by concealing Himself. The principle of the hidden Lord. What a concept. What a concept. Now this concept, if you got it, you got to get this. The principle of the hidden Lord. It's a key to the parables. If you don't understand this principle, then you won't understand the parables, man. You'll come into these parables and say, performance, do. Hey, this is not about being at all. This is about doing. Let's get with it. Crank it up. Do the right thing. What is the right thing to do? You're going to go down in the direction on this road. You're going to go down in the direction of what should I do instead of what should I be. But if you grasp the principle of the hidden Lord, you will see that this is all about, faith. I thought this was about being. Well, it is. But see, faith and being are the same. In fact, they're interchangeable terms. See, when we talk about being, we're not talking about inactivity. We're not talking about not doing. We're talking about sourcing. Faith is about sourcing. The essence of faith is the essence of Christianity because it's about trust and dependency and leaning and allowing and responding. See, it's not about doing. Doing is about faith in myself. This is about faith in the hidden Lord. This is about faith that is in what I cannot see. This is about faith in what I cannot argue anybody into. This is about faith in Him. This is about, hey, I'm trusting you. That the bottom line of the parables is about this Lord has hidden Himself. Oh, He's apparently absent, but only apparently. He's been here all the time. And will I, by faith, march into the scene of my living where He apparently is not here? And will I embrace Him and trust Him now? Faith. I need to give you a definition of faith. It's probably one we've given you before, but it's fundamental in the whole concept. A definition of faith is simply this: invoking the activity of the second party. In other words, faith is all about what? It's all about, hey, I can't, I'm going to let Him. I'm not able, I'm going to trust Him. Hey, I can't pull this off, I'm going to cling to Him. See, this is not about doing. I will do it. He requires it. I will do it. That's not Christianity. Christianity is about what? I can't do this. So I'm going to faith. I'm going to trust. I'm going to invoke the activity of this second party. Jesus is the second party. I'm going to call out, Jesus, this is your deal, not mine. I'm not going to live out of myself. I'm going to live out of Him. I'm not going to source me. I'm going to let Him source me. I'm not going to live my life for Christ. I'm going to let Christ live His life through me. That's being, which is the essence of faith. So faith and being are the same thing. Now, when it comes to the bottom line of judgment, hey, I want to be clear about that one, don't you? Hey, the thing is all over. Second coming has happened, man. The whole deal is all wrapped up. We're drug in before the great judgment bar of God. Here we stand, man. I want to know what the question is that's going to be asked. I want to know what the final deal is all about. I want to know what I'm going to be judged on. Is He going to ask me, how many times did you go to church? How much money did you give? How many times did you preach? How many people did you win to Jesus? How much, how many, how? Produce. Did you have 5 and then you got 10? You're good, you're in. Is that the basis of judgment? Now again, on surface level, you look at these parables and that looks like it's the basis of the judgment. Production, feed the poor, hey, double, produce, invest, hey, produce, hey, be prepared, get it done, come on, crank it up. That's not what this is about, folks. The hidden Lord explains that. He's not absent at all. He's here. And the issue of the parable is, by faith, did you embrace the Lord that you could not see? Now, you understand that we believe in the second coming. You know that we believe that Jesus is going to physically appear the second time. Now, I don't know how you picture that in your mind, but wow, how tall is he going to be? How muscular will he be? What will it look like? It'll be startling. You can be rest assured of that. So here's the physically raised, think of this. Here's the physically raised from the dead Jesus. Whoa! He shows up. There he is. Wow, we're all looking at him. Man, hey, now we're not going to need faith for that one. In fact, the scripture says, every knee will bow. Well, yeah, right, there he is. Nobody's going to sit down and say, well, I'm not so sure that your opinion is worth anything. I'm not so sure your theology is right. This is what I've been taught. See, nobody's going to say that. Why? Because all of that's out the window. This is not about what you've been taught, and this is not about theology, and this is not about what you've always believed, and this is not about what your parents believed, and this is not about, well, I was raised in another religion. This is not about that at all. This is about, whoa, right there he is, the physically raised from the dead Jesus. Man, there he is, there he is. And you're going to see him, and it will not need faith. There will be no faith then. It will be sight. It will be actual sight. Right there he is. We are seeing him. Now here's the issue. How are you going to act when you actually see him? Are you going to say, yes, there he is. Oh, Jesus, you just showed up in the nick of time. Oh, in the nick of time you showed up. I'm so grateful you came. Oh, my finances are out of control. Hey, I'm going to give all my finances to you. You can handle them, Lord. Man, I can't take it anymore. I've carried him, and what a mess it is. And I'm giving it all to you, so you take care of it, Lord. And I'm going to turn all my finances over to him. Oh, I'm going to say, oh, here's my family. My kids are running wild. I don't know what to do with my wife or my husband. And Lord, it's such a mess. And I don't know. And I've carried this. And I'm just about to commit suicide. Lord, I'm giving it all to you. Woo, you're here. Thank God you came to intervene. Wow, take over, Jesus. So I'm going to give him my family. Oh, here's the church, Lord. Oh, I don't know what to do with the church. All these people, they won't act right. And I can't get them to respond like they ought to. And Lord, there's no commitment. And I just don't know what to do. And I was about to quit. Glad you came. I'm turning this church over to you. So I'm going to turn my finance, right there he is. I'm going to turn my finances over to him. Going to turn my family over to him. Going to turn my church over to him. In fact, I'm going to give him hey, I'm taking a nap, man. Woo, I'm out of here. I'm gone. I'm going to rest. Well, why not? He's here. He can handle it. Now here's the issue of the parables. By faith, will you do that now? In other words, the way you're going to act when he actually shows up the second time, when he's actually there and you can see him and you won't need faith, the way you're going to respond there by giving him everything, will you do that now? Because the truth of the matter is, he is here now just as assuredly as he will be here then. The reality of his presence then is as sure as his reality of his presence now. He will not be here then more than he is here now. He is just as much here now as he will be here then. So will you, by faith, embrace the Jesus that you can't see, that you can't argue anybody into, that you can't put in a test tube, you can't boil it out, you can't, bottom line stuff. You can't scientifically investigate. You can't argue anybody into. But will you, by faith, embrace the Jesus that you cannot see now? And will you trust him in the same exact manner, to the same exact degree that you're going to do it when he actually shows up the second time? Because he is just as much here now as he will be then. Will you, by faith? That's the bottom line of judgment. And when it comes up to the final hour, the whole deal about whether you're going to be in or whether you're not going to be in, it's not about, what did you do? How did you do it? Did you do enough? Oh, you didn't do enough. Oh, you only prayed 5 hours and he wanted 10. Oh, no. You should have given so much. Oh, you didn't give enough. Oh, it's not going to be about your doing. You went down the wrong road. What should I do? This is not about what you should do. This is about, what should you be? Will you trust him? Will you embrace him? Will you let him influence your life? Will you let him source you? Will you let him literally be the energy of your life? Will you actually live in him? Will you know the flow of his very being? Will you actually embrace him now? Just like you will then. I have a goal in my life. I want to come up at the end of this whole thing when Jesus shows up in reality, and there'll be no faith. It'll be beside. I'm going to look him in the eye. And I want as little surprise as I can possibly get. In other words, I want to know him so well now. I want to get so tight with him. I want to be so sourced by him. I want to know his mind. I want to know his inner heart. I want to know what makes him tick. I want to know how he thinks. I want to know what drives him. I want to be in on him in such a flowing way. I want him to be in me in such a flowing way. I want to be so saturated with him and so filled with him that, hey, when he actually shows up physically and it's all beside, I'll say, hey, I'm just going to stand there and say, I told you, I told you, I told you, right there, I told you, I told you. By faith. Invoking the activity of the second party. So hey, crossroads, man. Crossroads. You can go down one end of the road. You can go down one direction of the road. And the question is, what should I do? You can go down the other direction of the road. What should I be? But you can't go down both of them. You got to go down one or the other. So Christianity for you is either going to be about what should I do? How am I going to do it? Did I do enough? Am I operating properly? Did I do the right thing? You can either live out of the doing, which is self, out of your self-doing, faith in yourself, and accomplishing it, and hoping he will bless you and that you please him. Or by faith, you can embrace him. Live out of him. Oh, let him live out of you until in the intimacy of his person and in the oneness of his very being, you experience the wonder of his presence and the reality of the Jesus that has hidden himself, that you cannot put in a test tube. You cannot figure him out. You cannot argue anybody into. You can't reason it through. You can't put it down in a test tube. You can't scientifically investigate it. This is about, wow, I'm embracing the Lord that I cannot see and I cannot argue and I cannot comprehend, but I'm embracing him like I will now. I'm embracing him now like I will when I see him face to face. And I'm allowing him to source my life. And I'm being in him what he wants me to be. Hey, it's the key to the parables. Let's pray together. Jesus, I love you with all my heart, and I want you to live within me. I desire to see you, to know you, to grasp you, to have you grasp me. I want your very mind and your very heart. I want to think like you think and know what you know. Please, Jesus, reveal yourself in the dark moments. Every single one of us, we're going through things, God, we can't find the answer to. We can't figure it out. We're asking the question, why? Why is this happening to me? What's this all about? Oh, Jesus, would you so reveal yourself to me that in the dark moments I would see you. I'm by faith am embracing you. And I'm marching into the moment into the moments of darkness, the moments, the places I cannot see. I'm embracing you there, for the purpose that you might reveal yourself to me and that I might know you. I'm looking for you by faith, being what you want me to be. In Jesus' name, amen.